There are a lot of Republican judges and even Trump-appointed judges who are ruling against the Trump administration's unlawful executive orders. At least for now, it does seem that the federal judges have the backbone that the spineless Republicans in the House and Senate don't have. Of course, there were also some Democratic appointed judges across the nation who have similarly issued injunctions against the Trump unlawful executive orders. But there does seem to be this grouping of judges in general, the solidarity amongst judges against the lawlessness of the Trump administration, for now at least, regardless of their political affiliations and who appoint them. I'll give just one example right here. So on Tuesday, an order was handed down by Judge John D. Bates, the District Court of D.C. This was a George W. Bush appointee, a more senior judge in the D.C. federal court system, someone who you would say is a conservative's conservative when that used to mean something. And what Judge John Bates ruled was, and you would think that this would not be all that controversial, but that the Department of Health and Human Services, the Center for Disease Control, the Food and Drug Administration, and some of these other agencies that are providing life-saving services on their websites, that the websites be restored until there's further determinations by the judge on the executive orders. These websites were taken down by the Trump administration, and people don't know where to go to get the resources that they need. Again, the CDC, we're talking about NIH, we're talking about HHS, we're talking about FDA, we're talking about now. The fact that a federal judge, remind you, Republican, said reinstate these websites. He didn't have a right to take them down. This is pissing off these spineless Republicans in the Senate and the House. MAGA Republican Senator Mike Lee writes, these judges are waging an unprecedented assault on legitimate presidential authority, all the way down to dictating what web pages the government has. This is absurd. Elon Musk then responds to Mike Lee. Elon Musk, basically the president or co-president, he goes, truly absurd. Judges as website editors, we should at least attempt to fire this junkie jurist. The notion of having a job for life, no matter how bad the judgments, is ridiculous. Enough is enough. Harry Littman, this is an attack here on a George W. Bush judge, but also you had Judge Carl Nichols, appointed by Donald Trump. He blocked Donald Trump's attempt to completely gut USAID and put a temporary pause on that. The judge in Washington State who blocked the birthright citizenship order, Reagan appointee. Another judge in Washington, D.C., not the state of Washington, Judge Lamberth, another Reagan appointee, though, blocked Donald Trump's forced sending of transgender women with female genitalia into the male prisons with their clothes off. And the judge said that's cruel and unusual punishment under the Constitution. So we're talking about Republican judges stepping up here. And now you see the assault on the judiciary. Harry Littman from the Talking Feds YouTube, Talking Feds Substack, the Talking Feds podcast. What do you make of all this, Harry?
Quite a lot. First, let's call it straight. This isn't just an attack on these Republican judges. This is an attack on federal judges. You have Musk saying flat out, how absurd to have judges who have a lifetime job. That's a constitutional provision, and it's there for a very important reason, so that they can enforce the law without political interference. And that is what they're doing. There's heartening news here, Ben, and then the jury's out, you could say, in another way of looking at it. So yes, Republican, Democrat, judges of all stripes and ages are doing their jobs, and their jobs are to say, guess what? All these Trump efforts are against the law. They are illegal. And that their being against the law really is just not controversial. Congress has established USAID. You cannot shut it down. You have to go to Congress. Congress has established job protection. So if you want to fire the head of of OGE, you need cause. They haven't even tried it. Same with inspectors general again. And I guess same with these pages. They're simply violating the law and saying, come at me and make me not do it. Well, that district court judges are doing their jobs is heartening. You could have been concerned that they wouldn't, but what are they doing? They're saying, looks like under the law, you're not allowed to do this, guys. And by the way, people are getting hurt. And that's something to really remember here, Ben, with all of these efforts by Trump to eviscerate watchdog protections, to get rid of public corruption prosecutors, to get rid of the brain trust in DOJ. You push a couple, a little bit on it, and you'll find real victims, corporations, people, etc., who are really being harmed. Why do I say the jury's out in other ways? Because the distinction we're really going to care about is district court and maybe even court of appeals judges versus the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, and now unless you're a district court judge, say like Matthew Kacsmaryk or Eileen Cannon in the tank for Trump, will do whatever they think is in his interest anyway, you apply the law. But there's a little more room in the joints for courts of appeals and a lot more room in the joints for the Supreme Court. So when certain assertions of executive authority, plainly unlawful now under the existing law, get to the Supreme Court, and there the Trump administration argues some crazy unitary executive theory that means they can mow down the entire administrative state, will the Supreme Court accept it or will they won't? That's the really sort of nail-biting $64,000 question. But for now, we should be really happy and heartened, but in a way, not surprised that the district court judges all over the country are stepping up to do what they do, saying, guess what? You violated the law, as the administration isn't trying even to pretend it hasn't. And guess what? You're really hurting people. When you withdraw aid right away, people are being harmed. When you take away jobs overnight and health benefits and strand people abroad, people are being harmed. When you simply take away a whole department in the Department of Justice, people are being harmed. The people who are the victims of the crimes that are no longer being done. So all to the good. And as you say, with the indolent and cowardly Senate and Congress not stepping up, and of course the White House doing as it will, and media often cowed, although we're trying very hard, you and I and a few others, for independent media to always blow the whistle here. We should be really glad that the courts and district court judges are playing their traditional role. And they're going to go ahead after doing these injunctions and make rulings. Then, of course, the administration will appeal it and will try their crazy, outlandish executive power arguments. And if some of those prevail, it could be real problems for the republic and constitutional rule. So I'm not surprised, but I'm heartened and pleased that from old guys like Lamberth to young appointees like Nichols, from Republicans and Democrats, judges are simply saying, hey, guess what? This is against the law. You're hardly even arguing otherwise. And I'm here exactly to enter an injunction for when that happens, notwithstanding, by the way, what guys like Senator Lee and J.D. Vance are suggesting, that somehow you should just roll over even to illegal assertions of authority by the executive branch.
For all the talking Fed heads, that's what I call Harry Litman's supporters, even if
there's a big controversy what to name us, by the way. We have a contest going, but go ahead.
So as I was saying, as even though Harry may or may not refer to his supporters and those who watch him as that, for those who've been watching our videos, we've been talking about that end of the year report that Chief Justice John Roberts where Chief Justice John Roberts warned against an executive branch. He seemed to clearly be indicating Donald Trump not following court orders, resorting to violence, And it seems that all of those warnings that Justice Roberts was clearly sending to the new DOJ are being violated, and just giving John Roberts the middle finger after John Roberts led a court that ended up giving Trump absolute immunity, and seemed to bend over backwards to the argument that by not giving absolute immunity, you would chill the ability of the executive to function, versus what was being stated by the dissent, the Democratic appointed judges, who said essentially you're going to give a criminal right now the power to behave as a dictator, and that's what you should be worried most about. The question becomes, all these cases that we're tracking here will wind up before the United States Supreme Court, probably in the next, 60, 90 days? I mean, it'll probably get there relatively soon, before the summer, a lot of these cases. And then what we're going to have to see after the Supreme Court gave absolute immunity, but then gave these other warnings, don't abuse it, and it's clearly being abused. Do you have a dynamic on the bench where you'll have Chief Justice John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett form a 5-4 with the liberal judges against the, let's face it, pro-fascist judges of, and I hate to say it like this, but, Kavanaugh, Clarence Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch seem that their version of conservatism is conserving the monarchy, and that they're cool with dictators. So I think that's where it heads. I'll give you the final word, though.
Yeah. So look, I basically agree in terms of timing. One of these cases, and it's going to depend on whether the administration says the sky is falling, are going to go up in an emergency setting. So in their normal course, they wouldn't go so quickly, but I agree at least one will. There are two big events in our legal landscape future. One is when the Supreme Court will first weigh in, and you got to think with what Robert said, they'll recognize if they're really in some existential situation where to empower Trump to basically violate the law is like, committing suicide with the Constitution. That's the first. After they do that, and if it's sufficiently brazen and they take it, I think they will push back against Trump. Then the biggest of all will be, will Trump actually give them the middle finger, which would be the ultimate constitutional crisis? No matter what people have said, Ben, and I'm writing about this just today, it hasn't happened before. If he actually says, screw you, court, screw you, Supreme Court, you said it, but I ain't doing it, we are in a really, really rock and a hard place as we've never been before in this country. And we're 3 weeks in. Can we actually go the next 205 without that happening? That'll be the big, big question to keep our eyes on. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.